The night glittered with chandeliers and champagne, the grand ballroom filled with the kind of wealth most people only ever read about. Elegant gowns shimmered under the soft golden light, diamonds flashed on wrists and necklines, and the air carried that unmistakable scent of money, power, and privilege. To many, this gala was a dream, a place of influence where fortunes were exchanged with a handshake and futures decided with a whisper. But within the first hour, that dream shattered into chaos when the unthinkable happened. The billionaire guest of honor, a man whose name was synonymous with empire and success, suddenly staggered and collapsed onto the marble floor. Glass shattered, chairs scraped, and gasps echoed like thunder. Everyone froze in shock, everyone, except for a young waitress no one even noticed before. Before I continue, take a second to like this video, subscribe to Kindness Corner, and share it with someone who believes in the power of compassion. These stories are here to remind us of the good in humanity, and your support helps keep them alive. And don't forget to comment your thoughts as you listen, your words inspire others too. At first, there was disbelief. Some of the most powerful men and women in the city just stood there, their eyes wide, their perfectly manicured hands clutching wine glasses. Nobody moved. Not the politicians, not the CEOs, not the high-profile guests who boasted of running entire industries. For a fleeting moment, it was as if their wealth and influence stripped them of their basic humanity. And then there was her, Elena, a waitress whose name wasn't printed on any invitation, whose presence wasn't celebrated, and whose story no one in that room cared to know. She was just a face in a simple uniform, weaving through tables unnoticed. But when the billionaire collapsed, it was Elena who dropped her tray and ran forward, her heart pounding louder than the orchestra's silence. Elena wasn't a doctor. She wasn't rich or powerful. She wasn't even supposed to be near the stage. Yet as she knelt on the marble floor beside the unconscious man, her trembling hands reached for his pulse, and memories surged through her mind like waves crashing against a fragile shore. Only months before, she had stood in a hospital room, holding her father's hand as his heart gave out. She had watched nurses fight for his life, and though they couldn't save him, their courage left an imprint on her soul. Tonight, in the middle of this dazzling ballroom, she remembered every detail of that moment. She knew she couldn't stand by. Panic rippled through the crowd. People muttered about calling 911, but no one moved with urgency. They hesitated, as though afraid to get too close. The billionaire, Mr. Harrison, was gasping, his lips turning pale, his life hanging in a delicate balance. Elena's fear nearly paralyzed her, but something deeper pushed her forward, that fire in her chest, that ache that said, if I don't try, he might die right here. She tilted his head back, checked his airway, and began chest compressions. Her arms ached almost immediately, but she didn't stop. The sound of her hands pressing into his chest echoed louder than the silence of the onlookers. The sight was jarring. A young waitress on her knees, sweat already forming on her brow, fighting desperately to keep a billionaire alive while his peers looked on helplessly. Some whispered doubts. Others pulled out phones. A few even criticized under their breath, saying she would do more harm than good. But Elena blocked it all out. In her mind, she was back in that hospital room with her father, except this time she refused to let death win without a fight. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, a guest who was a doctor rushed forward to assist, but he quickly realized the young waitress had kept the man's heart pumping long enough to give him a chance. Together, they worked until paramedics arrived, and when Mr. Harrison was lifted onto the stretcher, his pulse had returned, faint but steady. Elena sat back, her arms trembling, her face flushed with exhaustion, and tears welling in her eyes. The ballroom erupted in murmurs, disbelief, amazement, and shame. The richest people in the room had frozen. The waitress, the invisible one, had been the only one brave enough to act. The gala ended in disarray, but Elena's night was far from over. She went home to her tiny apartment, still in shock, still replaying the scene in her mind. She expected nothing, no thanks, no recognition. For her, it was never about attention. She did it because it was right, because in that moment she remembered her father and couldn't bear to watch another life slip away. She thought her life would return to the same rhythm, working double shifts, studying nursing textbooks by candlelight, struggling to pay rent. But fate had different plans. The next morning, headlines blazed across every paper: Waitress saves billionaire at Gala. Social media erupted with videos captured by guests who had been too frozen to help but quick enough to film. Millions of strangers now knew her name. The world that had once ignored her suddenly wanted to know her story. Reporters camped outside her apartment. Strangers sent her messages of admiration. And Mr. Harrison, the billionaire whose life she had saved, wanted to meet her. When she entered his hospital room days later, she felt small again, just as she had in that ballroom. But this time, Harrison was awake, pale but smiling faintly. His eyes softened when he saw her, a man who had spent his life surrounded by people who wanted his money finally looking at someone who had only wanted to save his life. With a shaky voice, he thanked her. Not just for her quick actions, but for reminding him of something he had forgotten, that humanity isn't measured in wealth or power, but in courage, compassion, and heart. That meeting changed everything. Harrison learned about Elena's struggles, her dream of becoming a nurse, and the pain of losing her father. Moved beyond words, he offered to fund her education, to give her the chance to fulfill her dream of helping others. It wasn't charity to him, it was gratitude, it was honor. Elena had given him back his life, the least he could do was give her the means to live hers fully. Months passed, and Elena's world transformed. She left her waitress uniform behind and walked into classrooms where she studied medicine with relentless determination. Her story became one that inspired millions, not because she saved a billionaire, but because she proved that no act of courage is too small, no life too unimportant, and no person too invisible. And as for Harrison, the man who had built his empire on steel and stone, he rebuilt something even stronger within himself: humility. He often said in interviews that the moment he collapsed wasn't the end of his life, it was the beginning of his awakening. And it all began because a waitress chose to act when no one else would. So remember this: heroes don't always wear uniforms, and sometimes the people you overlook are the very ones who can change everything. Before we close, I want to ask you, what would you have done if you were in Elena's place? Would fear have held you back, or would compassion have pushed you forward? Comment your thoughts below. Your voice matters more than you know. And don't forget to subscribe to Kindness Corner for more stories that remind us all of the incredible power of kindness. Because in the end, it's not about who has the most wealth or the brightest jewels. It's about who has the courage to care when it matters most.